today's presentation, I want to talk about, I went a bit in depth with the thematic of the EU guidelines of 2013, and I have deepened in the theme of extremism and terrorism related to this guideline, specifically considering the role of the EU in balancing the need for security and the need for freedom of religion. So, as I was saying, the EU has always been committed to granting the right of freedom of religion and belief throughout many ways, one of which is the EU guidelines, about which we'll talk later on. And there has always been this question about measuring and balancing the need for security and the need for freedom of religion, also considering the terrorist attacks that since the second half of the 21st century have been happening in Europe. Especially in this presentation, I will go considering the example of the measures adopted by the French government after the 2015 terrorist attack in Paris. So, there are other bigger frameworks that I've considered in this presentation to make a whole content, which are the Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which protects the right to freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and at the same time allows restrictions for national security reasons. At the same time, the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights reinforces the right to religious freedom inside the European Union. But at the same time, we see that also here there is a purpose for the limitation of religion for security reasons. And also the European Court of Human Rights ruled that there is a need to balance these two needs in our European Union. So there is the EU guidelines on the promotion and protection of freedom of religion or belief of 2015, which highlights many key aspects and went really in depth. So we see that throughout the guidelines there is the need for the European Union to promote not just in the Union the need to feel free to support each own religion and belief, but the EU states that they engage in diplomatic efforts to promote globally the need for religious risk, to granting the religious freedom in places where it's at risk. Also, it says that the EU is committed to protect religious freedom in a country where that is put at risk, such as the Christian in the Middle East. We saw it in an intervention like in Syria, and also right now in Muslims minorities in Myanmar. Of course, there is an important role played by the EU inside of the Union, and so it's also committed to improve the level of tolerance towards the freedom of religion, and also it has widened to the online dimension through the commitment of the European Union to prevent hate speech over religion and freedom of belief in the media, online media, and social media dimension. As I was saying, I've been taking into consideration the role of balancing security and freedom of religion, also considering facts that happened in Europe in the 2015 Paris attacks, which were coordinated and made up mostly by the ISIS movement, in which 130 people were killed. And so I tried to understand which measures the EU and the country of France stepped in order to grant at the same time the security needs, of course, that France needed at the moment and the French population needed at the moment, while at the same time not going to lever the level of freedom of religion. And so I found that the measures taken by the French government try to prevent and leverage the level of freedom of religion in order to step on the need for national security reasons. And this also brought to the French communities a level of stigma against the Muslim communities, even if the guidelines promoted by the European Union ask not to go with discriminatory legal frameworks by the governments, but after the terrorist attacks, of course, there was a security need that the French government had to take in place. And so another legal framework is a directive, is not mandatory for European states to improve it, but the directive of the 27 for 541 on combating terrorism, of course, was taking place after all the events of terrorist attacks, allowed for earlier interventions against especially Muslim communities and so it stopped in the level of freedom of religion some aspects, such as clothing. You could not wear like a full typical Muslim hijab, and so or you could not have sermons in public places, as it was a problem for security reasons, as civilian population might, I don't know, take action against such initiatives. And also there was this kind of, as I was saying, stigma against the Muslim population, as in that period all Muslim people were seen as probably terrorists. Also for this context that the government tried to step on, but at the same time tried to prevent it. And so the official law that France brought was called Law to Uphold Republican Principles, and the title itself shows this try to defend the needs of the Republic, and it was unofficially called the Anti-Separatism Law, and it was stepped on to combat Islamist extremism, but it faced many critics for its disproportionate target of Muslim communities. In fact, it was forbidden for the Muslim communities to have their own homeschooling, which is widely followed by Muslim families, and it was mandatory for Muslim associations to communicate and to state-owned entities where they have been taking their money for their works, as many associations get their money from Middle East countries, so it was the government was afraid to have terrorist financement from those regions. And so many critics were affected the fact that these all these measures try to stigmatize. We're not trying, but the result of such legal frameworks were stigmatizing the Muslim population. So we do see here like a picture of a protest asking to stop Islamophobia, and with such legal frameworks, the government did not try, but the result was that Muslim people were seen as radicalists, and they were not expressing their freedom of belief and religion. So this was like a good example to see how it is hard to make the guidelines fit inside the actual society of the European countries, as many single fact can bring many other factors to get involved, and maybe to discrimination against the freedom of religion. In this case, it was against Muslims, but it may be against any other kind of religion or freedom of belief. And so today, EU is trying to adjust its response to such facts, as the EU counterterrorism agenda of 2020 tried to do, and as it underlined that effective counterterrorism policies must respect human rights and avoid stigmatizing communities based on religion, which was what happened in the French society. So I kind of think that it was a measure considering the practical fact that happened in Europe in the previous years. And also with the Digital Service Act of 2022, there was a limit to online extremism content, as we saw that in the previous years there were images or videos very cruel, very hard to see, in which the ISIS were expressing their own opinion in a very cruel way. And but at the same time, the Digital Service Act wants to stop such contents, but at the same time they want to safeguard the legitimate right to expression. So the guidelines is a good tool for the beginning of the EU efforts in order to try to engage in such freedom of religion and belief, but it needs to then take into consideration practical facts that are right now in the hands of the governments. And so it's not just a political answer to security and to the need for assuring rights to people, but it also needs, I kind of think that it needs courage from the politicians, not to go for the easiest way of stigmatizing people when events occur, but of course there is a need for politicians, and also of course for the whole society, to go for a deeper understanding of religious diversity, of freedom of belief, and freedom of speech, of course, and it needs to balance the need to security and to freedom with measures that are really practical and do need to be really diversified inside the context of the I think that's all. Any questions?